I'll repeat that again, just so everyone can hear. All centralized systems which contain information related to personal identities is vulnerable to identity thieves. They're out there. This is what they do. Welcome to Blockchain 2025. We explore how blockchain technology will affect major industries in the future.
Each episode dissects one industry, how it currently works, why blockchain can disrupt it, and some blockchain projects trying to be the solution.
Blockchain 2025 is part of the Bitcoin.com podcast network. Learn about Bitcoin, create a wallet, and buy your first Satoshis all at Bitcoin.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 5 of Blockchain 2025. This is Matt Aaron.
And I'm Nick Cutnero.
So, Nick, I really enjoyed last week's episode on publishing, but I think it's fair to say there are a lot of challenges for the publishing industry to become decentralized and benefit from blockchain. But this week is another one of those what we'll call no-brainer home run episodes where, yes, we need the blockchain to come into the industry.
Absolutely. This week we'll be talking about identity applications on the blockchain.
Identity applications. So, Nick, to clarify, you mean identity like your personal information, all the information you submit, driver's license, social security numbers, credit card numbers, everything about you that's connected to you online?
Absolutely. So today we'll be discussing how blockchain technology will be impacting the identity verification industry and applications where anyone and everyone would be in a position where their identity must be verified in order to proceed with something, whether that be renting a car, whether that be applying for a job with Uber or Lyft, or anything else, going to the bank, maybe opening a credit card or a line of credit, things like that.
For sure. So I think we should move right into the current state of the industry. I'll start out with a stat here. Identity theft and fraud cost consumers more than $16 billion in 2016. It's a ton of money. I mean, what else? What are the other problems right now in the industry, Nick?
Well, the reality is this. Online fraud and identity hacks, they're a serious problem. As more devices are now connected to the internet than ever before, so think laptops, smartphones, tablets, heck, your refrigerator now. It's now easier than ever before to lose track of your own personal identity details, and trusted third parties, or you think they're trusted, they're often negligent, and their interests with respect to caring for your data, they might not be in line with your expectations, and frankly, they're just not in the data and security business that go to measures to protect identity.
For sure. And I think now is a great time for me to talk about a very famous event from last year, the Equifax hack.
Breaking news from the credit monitoring company Equifax. Cyber thieves making off with private information of 143 million Americans, nearly half the U.S. population.
This information is going to be sold left and right on the black market. People are going to be able to open up credit cards for the rest of your life once they have that information.
They can go out and purchase a home in your name. They can open bank accounts, take car loans.
Someone who has your social security number could actually take a job, they could file taxes, and even claim your kids as dependents and be gone with your refund before you ever actually file a tax return.
In case you didn't hear about the Equifax hack, which happened in August of 2017, it was one of the largest hacks of personal information in history. Recovering from identity theft could take months or even years, and no one is responsible for cleaning up the mess but yourself. It can potentially ruin your finances, destroy your reputation, or prevent you from getting necessary medication. And recovering from identity theft isn't easy. You'll have to disprove to your bank, doctor, or the government everything that a criminal did in your name using the same documentation the cyber thief used. You'll also have to prove that you weren't at the place at the time when the fraud was committed. There were also suspicions of insider trading. Why? Because 4 senior executives at Equifax sold shares in early August, just days after workers inside Equifax discovered the data breach. A committee concluded that the executives acted appropriately and that none of them engaged in insider trading. So yes, a very frightening example that is affecting all of us and probably people listening to the show. It's also worth noting that Equifax had records of people that had never even used their credit monitoring service. Okay, Listeners, before we continue, can you please subscribe on iTunes or whatever app you use to listen to podcasts, as it helps to get the show in front of more people. I wouldn't bug you if it wasn't this important. And Nick, to be blunt, it's pretty clear that the current identity verification industry sucks. Let's start off with the fact that these centralized identity verification companies, and we talked before about Uber and other companies that have to do this custody, meaning they have to keep this information, they aren't even in the identity verification business. But the ones that are in the identity verification business, they tend to suck as well.
Matt, it's kind of funny. I'm seeing this meme in my head where it says, you only had one job. I don't know if you've ever seen that before, but there are companies out there, and we don't have to name names. We already did that. But their entire job is to protect the integrity of data, and more specifically, identity data. And they're failing. They're getting hacked. They only have one job: protect it. It's the same as criminals having only one job: to get that data.
Yeah, and the way it's set up, it's obviously not working, despite whether really good intentions or not. And yeah, I mean, I don't think Equifax will be retweeting this episode, although if they did, it would be pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, we mentioned the fact that other companies have to have their own business of keeping customer data. But as we're going to talk about later, with identity verification on the blockchain, car rental, mortgage loan companies, they won't have to do that anymore. And that's amazing.
Absolutely. The entire model where we trust a centralized authority or any company, let it be the car rental or the mortgage company, to protect our personal data, it's just a faulty idea from the start.
Yeah, and let me give you another example here. Nick, let's just say the two of us go out for a beer in Charleston, South Carolina. And, you know, they would say, hey, 2 Budweiser. And they ask me for my ID. So I show them my ID and what's on there: my name and address, my blood type, my height, my weight, my driver's license number. But there's really only one piece of data that matters to buy a beer. And what's that? That's my birth date. So being able to share, fragmented data, only the data necessary for a specific function, in this case, making sure that I'm 21 to buy a beer. I think that's an exciting application of blockchain and identity verification.
Absolutely. And I love Charleston, South Carolina. Great food town. But Matt, to your point, that brings up a very good topic where you mentioned your ID in your wallet. Who's to say that that ID is fake? And I think blockchain technology takes that one step further, where all of the young people out there, the likelihood of utilizing a fake ID really goes out the window. That will not be a reality as we approach the year 2025.
Yeah, so for me, it's just going to be a high school memory. Full disclosure, in high school, I took a bus, I think I went with some friends up in a car to Chinatown in New York, and we found this clothing store, and in the back of the store, they made these really crappy ID for me, and my name was Michael Ratino, which I used to buy beer. So I guess if I was entering high school a few years from now, I may not have that option.
I have a similar story. It was in college. I was visiting a friend at the University of Maryland, and I went to a bar in the power plant district in Baltimore. And the funny thing was, the bouncer knew the ID was fake. He took my ID, but proceeded to let me in. That was my tax that I had to pay.
Very interesting. What do you think you did with that ID?
Probably sold it to somebody else where it looked more like them.
Yeah.
I'm an Italian guy from New York, so that ID probably would be better suited to an Irish guy, likely taller.
Yeah, man. So it's really funny, man. So the whole setup is just that, all these data hacks, all your information is lost. And you have data all over the place right now, right? I have personal information with so many companies, and we're putting so much trust in centralized authorities. The amount of information that Facebook and Google and the third-party apps that connect to them is astounding.
Every place that you're transacting with that means something, your identity could be compromised. And blockchain helps solve that issue.
Yeah, and medical records, really, as I mentioned, with Equifax, all your data going out the window, you can, crimes, people can get speeding tickets in your name. The possibilities are endless. It's a huge problem, and identity theft can really, it can ruin your credit score. It can prevent you from buying a house. You might have to pay a lawyer $10,000 just to get your credit score fixed, no fault of your own.
Absolutely. It's important to note that all centralized systems which contain information related to personal identities is vulnerable to identity thieves. I'll repeat that again. All centralized systems which contain information related to personal identities is vulnerable to identity thieves. They're out there. This is what they do. And if that information doesn't find itself in a decentralized platform, it's just annoying. That's the word. If you're the victim of an identity hack or your identity is compromised, it's just a pain in the butt.
Right. And it can be anywhere from annoying and pain in the butt to cause you real problems in your life. Blockchain 2025 listeners, did you know that I host another show on the Bitcoin.com podcast network? It's called This Week in Bitcoin, a 10-minute summary of all the news in the Bitcoin world, delivered to your phone and podcast app every Friday morning. We also include exclusive news from China that does not appear in English language publications. Search for This Week in Bitcoin on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So Nick, I think we've done a great job defining the problem. So parts 2 and 3 of the show, which as you know are part 2, which is how would blockchain solve and disrupt, and part 3, what are some projects that are trying to be the solution? Let's combine them into one today. So Nick, start off with how blockchain could solve and disrupt with the project Civic.
I love Civic. So I'll just focus on that specific company for this instance. So instead of having companies or third parties acting as custodians for your data, Civic is creating a platform where individuals become the custodians. People are responsible for their own data, and the need to provide data points to anyone else really just goes out the window. And specific information can be shared on a need-to-know basis where certain forms of identity verification are required.
Makes sense. So tell me a little bit more about Civic in terms of how it would interact with, let's say, a bank.
So I look at software as a service as a fantastic model. Companies use that all the time. You no longer have to build it, you can buy it. And what Civic is doing, I'd like to call identity as a service. This is where a company like Civic or Persona, they can come in, disrupt the current state of the industry, and there's nothing stopping a bank or any company from being an integration partner. We mentioned that car rental company before. They don't need to hire a CTO or a CIO to go develop a system that addresses security. They can just simply be an integration partner of Civic or any of the other projects out there and rely on a company that specializes in this space that is making progress toward addressing the security issues currently affecting the current state of the industry.
For sure. So let me give you a concrete example there, Nick. Software as a service, for people that don't know what that term is, just think of integrations, plugins that you can use for your company so you don't have to build it yourself. And then this car rental example, right? Usually I'd have to show my ID, my credit card, give them all the information. With something like Civic, Civic is an app that holds all of my information. So basically, Civic can do the magic. We'll just call it magic for right now without going into the technical details of proving to the rental car company that I am who I say I am, that I have a driver's license, and that I'm eligible to drive this car without actually giving the car rental company my information and transferring that to them and making it a liability.
Absolutely. You nailed it. So another area of identity that is really below the surface, but so important, and we do it every single day, is website identity authentication.
And Nick, I'm going to interrupt you really quick. Just website identity authentication, just to make sure people know, because like you said, we all do it. It's just you want to sign up for a new service, and it's like continue with your Facebook account to log in, or use your Google account to log in instead of creating an ID there. That's something that everyone listening has done. But keep going, Nick.
So it's absolutely ridiculous authenticating with Twitter, Facebook, or email, as the case may be, because in all three of those examples, anyone can hack your Facebook, hack your Twitter, hack your email to gain access to a part of the internet that you think is only available to you. So Civic levels the playing field where you can authenticate in a decentralized manner using your mobile device. Think two-factor authentication, but better. And you don't have to rely on a centralized third party, more specifically, a social network. They should be in the social network business, not the identity verification business.
Right on. So Civic could really be your one-stop shop on your mobile device to buy things, to get a credit score, to do anything so that none of these third parties ever have to hold your information again.
Yes, and I'd recommend everyone test drive Civic. Go to the App Store, download their app, and try authenticating with the website. I'll give you an example. WikiHow, they've integrated Civic on their website, so you have a choice now. Twitter, Facebook, maybe Google, email, Civic. Give Civic a try, and you'll have that aha moment where it's like every website should operate like this.
Amazing. So I'd also like to highlight another project that's similar to Civic, but there's some pretty interesting differences here. It's called Persona. This is another project that I'm really excited about, Nick, and I'm excited to tell you about it. So what is it? Persona should be seen more like an identity protocol, on top of which someone can develop any type of interaction with a third party. So obviously companies, the software as a service part, they can use it for their data storage of personal information, just like Civic can. And then also users can edit their persona, right? Great name, to control the data that they share. So let's give some applications here. As a reporter, you could have your identity checked, and since the articles are signed with your private key, right, using your persona over blockchain, your materials should be in the top results in Google because they are not fake news. Associating identity with an article, making sure that you are the real person writing that article. This kind of connects back to last week's episode on publishing, and could be, maybe persona could be a competitor or a complement to something like Poet. A few other things that are interesting to me about Persona are, one, they are GDPR compliant. What is that? Well, it's in the EU, the General Data Protection Regulation, going live this May. And it will replace their data protection directive. Okay, I'm just going some legal speak here, but basically it's a law that governs how EU citizens' data must be protected by companies. So it's a compliance. So if you're going to store personal data in the EU, they seem to be more advanced than the US in this, you have to be GDPR compliant. Persona already is that. They also are KYC and AML compliant. So AML is anti-money laundering, making sure that you're not doing nefarious things with your money. And KYC is know your customer, that banks have to follow. So another interesting application of Persona, you could have these financial institutions offering, as you mentioned, Nick, identity as a service, an option to allow someone from the EU, the European Union, to onboard with an American or a United States entity, because they can tell using Persona that the client of the EU entity has a KYC that has already been done for them. So you can get rid of a lot of double work, a much faster application process, in addition to protecting the data. The final thing that's very interesting, and we haven't talked about this too much on an episode yet, but there's going to be a need for interoperability for blockchains, meaning that you may want to interact with the Bitcoin blockchain or the Ethereum blockchain or the Litecoin blockchain from one space. Just like with Google Chrome, you can use all these protocols, which will substitute for blockchain, to use HTTP or SMTP for email or TCP/IP. Google Chrome interacts with all of them. And that's what Arc does using smart bridges. And Persona is a fork of Arc, meaning that it will provide cross-blockchain verification. What else? Just like Civic, the mobile application security will have a PIN-based login and fingerprint scans. So yeah, I'm really excited about Persona, Nick.
Yeah, me too. That sounds like a great project. And I like how you mentioned fingerprint scans. And I think it's a good point to bring up for our listeners that everyone has smartphones in their pockets right now, and they're remarkable tools. You have thumbprint verification. You have facial recognition with the camera. You have voice recognition. Heck, you could probably figure out a way for it to detect you're human by measuring that you have a pulse. So the great thing about introducing identity on the blockchain is that it reduces or eliminates the potential for hacks, because personally identifiable information will be stored on a user's device natively, not on a third party's servers or in the cloud, so to speak.
For sure. And I want to give a huge Shout out to Persona for their contributions and their research for this episode. And to conclude, Nick, give me your final summary. Identity verification for the blockchain.
There's no doubt I'm a bull on this. It's a pretty cut and dry application of how blockchain will improve the current state of a broken, very, very broken industry where many of us have experienced compromise, whether it be your identity being stolen completely or just a credit card being utilized by an unknown third party. Let it be a Home Depot outside of Atlanta. That was me. Took a trip to Miami, and next thing you know, my credit card is now being utilized in a different state. So long term, I'm a bull. Short term, we're years away from disruption to the point where decentralized data and blockchain technology will become the new standard. It's going to take a lot of education, a lot of pushing. And for Civic in particular, I like Vinny Lingham at the helm. I think he's one hell of a salesman. I think he's a business development genius. And I believe he's really well connected and can execute the idea. So short term, it's going to take a lot of websites integrating Civic to really get the name out there. But there is no doubt that blockchain will impact this currently broken industry for the better.
For sure. And I'd say the same thing about Persona. They also have a very talented team. Maybe not as well known as someone like Vinny Lingham, who was on the South African Shark Tank. But I'll tell you something, Nick. The PRS token, which is used to pay for verification, so companies can pay each other using the token, in terms of the tokenomics or the token economics, is that something that you need to hold, or is it something that you can simply buy when you need it for verifications? And that could affect the long-term value. I'm not going to speculate on whether it's going to go up or down. All I know is I believe in the project. But in terms of an investment, I'd have to figure out, and this would really be my own due diligence on the value of the token and how that would be affected and the velocity of the token. But there's no doubt that, Civic and Persona are just two. I'm sure more people are going to come into the space. They probably already are. But this is a huge problem that needs to be solved. Having more sovereignty over your personal information, having less censorship resistance, having to prove who you are, and give, especially in Nick in South America, the amount of fingerprints and paperwork and fees just to prove who you are, who you say you are, getting rid of that in terms of ease of use, cost, time is just a big win. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's also a no-brainer for the long term that blockchain will disrupt identity verification for the better. And finishing up here, please subscribe on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, because it helps us get the podcast in front of more people. Leave reviews, all that good stuff, especially subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. It means so much to us. And Nick, what industry are we doing next week?
Next week, we'll be covering cryptocurrency debit cards.
All right. Again, keep bugging you guys every week. Guys and gals, thanks so much for listening. Subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Vogue, the host of Humans of Bitcoin, the brand new show on the Bitcoin.com podcast network. We'll be interviewing regular people with fascinating stories of how Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and blockchain technology have changed the course of their lives.
So all the kids should try drugs at least once in their life. Oh, okay, I am being kind of funny now, but that's how it worked out for me. And I think that in the end, I'm going to help a lot more people besides myself by bringing this revolutionary technology to the masses.
Tune in to Humans of Bitcoin every Tuesday wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for listening to the Bitcoin.com podcast network. To learn more about our shows, visit Bitcoin.com/podcast. Bitcoin.com podcast network.